Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to the Infatuasian podcast. This is a show where we talk about and with Asian creators that we love. Got a really fun one for you today, guys. We're going to be speaking with Ellie Yang Camp. Ellie is an artist, an educator, a mom, and now an author. She has written a book called Louder Than the Lies. It basically asks the question, what does it mean to be Asian American? How did we get here? How do we navigate this system? How do we break out of the system? I think it's going to make you think. I think it hopefully will make you have a conversation with people. Maybe you can read it with your family. Maybe you can read it with your friends. It's just a really important book, I think. And so we had a good time chatting. It was me, Ellie, and Cynthia. Cynthia is the owner of the On Waverly gift shop and bookstore down in Chinatown, San Francisco. And so if you enjoy our conversation today, you can actually get more of it. We're going to be speaking live with Ellie on October 17th at the On Waverly bookstore. So come on down and get a copy of the book, get it signed, and hear a good conversation with me and Ellie. So I hope you come down and join us. I hope we see you there. It'll be really fun. I think it starts at 5:30 next Thursday. But if you can't do that, I hope you enjoy this episode, and I hope you get a copy of this book and read it and talk about it with your family and friends. And so, as usual, we are so glad that you're here, and thank you so much for listening. And we are here with Ellie Yang Camp. She is an artist and educator from the San Francisco Bay Area.
Hi.
You know, actually, funny story, Ellie. I got a DM from someone. I don't know if you know them. Her first name is Ruth, but they live next to your parents. And I don't think you know. She doesn't know you, but
okay. But she knows my parents.
She keeps in touch with your parents, and she said, "Oh, I live next to Ellie's parents." And so when she saw my post, she was like, "Oh, say hi." So anyway,
Hi,
Ruth knows your mom. So anyway,
my mom knows a lot of people. My mom is one of those like super extroverted people.
Okay,
so
yeah.
I'm not surprised.
Anyway, so yeah, Bay Area local girl, proud daughter of Taiwanese immigrants. She has been a high school history teacher, a full-time parent, a calligrapher. We'll talk about that a little later. And an anti-racist educator, and now a published author of a new book that we're going to talk about called Louder Than the Lies. Welcome to the show, Ellie Yang Camp.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, our pleasure. And I am not alone. To my left, in the upper room, sweating it out in an unusually hot San Francisco afternoon is the co-owner of On Waverly bookstore that we're at, seems like every other day, but we are at On Waverly. She is Cynthia Huey. Hey, Cynthia.
Woohoo!
Thank you very much, Curtis.
Oh, yeah, no, I definitely want to have you on because Ellie, I saw Cynthia on Monday and I was like, yeah, I'm talking to Ellie on Thursday. And Cynthia was like, oh, I love this book. I have so many thoughts on this book. And then so sitting in my room on Monday afternoon or Monday evening, I was like, well, why don't we just have Cynthia on the podcast, too? Because actually, Cynthia was the one who introduced me to Ellie, too.
That's true.
So we're going full circle here. So the three of us are going to chat about this book. We'll get to it in a second. But first of all, you know, normally we ask people, we greet people in the Asian way, have you eaten yet? And normally it's like 4 p.m, so it doesn't make any sense. But actually, it is actually around lunchtime, so it does make sense. So Ellie, have you eaten yet?
Yes, I have. Thank you for asking. I made sure to not come on this podcast with an empty belly.
Good, yeah,
sure.
We don't like that. Cynthia, have you had any food yet?
I had a lovely banana, and I think after this, I'm going to go get some rice rolls at the new Rice Roll Express.
Yeah.
Because I'm in Chinatown, and there's so many delicious things around me right now.
Now, you are literally in the heart of Chinatown, which means, yeah, lunch hour at On Waverly must be pretty cool.
It's pretty delicious every day.
You never bring food from home. Do you ever bring food from home, or you're like... No, why would I?
I try to. I do try to eat a salad every day,
Okay.
and I do enjoy salad. So I know it doesn't sound appealing, but I do try to eat a salad to go with my rice rolls.
Okay. All right. So I, however, would be at Dim Sum, what's it called? Bistro, or I'd be at Rice Roll Express. What are my other favorite places? Any of those places. All good stuff. But yeah, so actually, what time are you getting here on Thursday, Ellie? Are you going to be here?
It starts at 5:30. I'm gonna try to beat the traffic, so I'll
Okay.
try to get there probably around 4 or
All right.
4:30.
Maybe we can
You
grab some
know,
dim sum before
hang
that. Some,
around.
some
Yeah.
late afternoon dim sum. Yeah. All right, but we get ahead of ourselves. This is not a food podcast today, though we do food podcasts all the time. We are talking about Louder Than the Lies, which will be available everywhere October 22nd. But we have heard through our extensive network, we have heard that you may be able to find it if you have pre-ordered it. It probably will be in the bookstores already, or you can pre-order it now. But if you would like to get an early copy of it, you can visit on Waverly Bookstore, the corner of Waverly and Washington. You can get a copy there, and you can hear Ellie and I talk live on October 17th. So we can talk to you about the book, and then you can buy the book and get it signed in fancy calligraphy.
Actually, yeah, probably. I mean, that's actually something I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, yeah.
Writing people's names, nice.
Yeah, okay. Very cool. Maybe I'll throw in my middle name too while we're at it, since my first and last name are kind of short. My middle name is a little longer, so you can have fun with that. So,
Oh, yeah, more letters. More letters make more possibilities.
yeah.
That's
What
fun.
is your middle name, Curtis? I'm
Well,
so cute.
it's not very interesting. It's Jonathan,
Oh,
but
okay.
it's longer than my first or
A
last name.
lot of good letters. A
J
lot
is
of good
good, right?
letters.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll give you some time to practice. I'll give you a practice sheet. You can do a couple run throughs. All right. So we were talking to Ellie. We usually like to talk about our guests' roots a little bit. So born and raised in the Bay Area.
I'm technically born in New York, but
Oh.
we moved to San Jose when I was like 1.
Okay.
So I have no memories of New York,
Yeah.
but I can't quite say born and raised in San
Yeah.
Jose, but I'm very much raised in San Jose. I've lived in the Bay Area my entire life. So I went to Berkeley for school. I'm
Uh-huh.
in Mountain View now. I ended up kind of in the cusp of the South Bay Peninsula area. So
Okay. Okay, but roots in Taiwan. Now, do you introduce yourself as Taiwanese American?
I do. So my parents are immigrants from Taiwan. My family is very proudly Taiwanese. I was raised, we are Taiwanese.
Not Chinese.
I have never identified as Chinese.
Uh,
Not that I have anything against Chinese people. It's just my family, the way I was raised, it was like, this is who we are.
yeah.
And so we're very proud of that.
Yeah.
But nothing. I would categorize myself into. I accept like Chinese diasporic.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
I would be like, yeah, sure, sure. But if you ask me how I identify as Taiwanese.
Yeah. You had that funny story. What was it, fourth grade or something? Some boy was teasing you and called you a Chinese wonton. And you're
He
like,
did.
joke's on you. I'm not Chinese.
Well, I mean, I think part of it was I was trying to come up with a comeback, and I'm not good at that. Like, I'm not good at quick comebacks. And I was like, the only thing I could turn to very quickly was like, I'm not Chinese. I'm not Chinese.
And he's like, Korean wonton? You're like,
Yeah,
nope.
he was like, yes. He couldn't figure. He's like, Japanese one. And I'm like, it's not me either. So I think it threw him off,
Yeah.
which was, I think, the
No,
goal.
that
you know,
worked.
so.
Yeah, it totally worked. No, it's cool that you're proud of your roots. I lived with a couple Taiwanese guys in college, and they were American born, and so they never learned Mandarin. They only knew Taiwanese. So that
Yeah.
was kind of cool.
I'm I'm kind of both. I'm terrible in both languages,
Okay.
but I would say at home there was more Taiwanese than Mandarin.
Oh, okay.
I would say I've failed at both languages.
Yeah, same.
But also for me, I feel like the struggle was, well, if you're going to learn another language, what are you going to devote your time to? And it's
Right.
like Mandarin is clearly the more practical one, but Taiwanese is more, of the family, but there's not a lot of resources to learn it. And so it was kind of this like, at some
Yeah,
point I was like, Ellie, it's okay. Just be
yeah.
yourself. It's okay not to worry about it so much.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, Toy-san is like that for sure. So my family would have spoken, my ancestors would have spoken Toisanwa, which you don't see any materials for that. So, but even Cantonese now, I think, is a lot of Cantonese speaking parents are kind of in that dilemma where it's like, should we teach our kids Cantonese, but it's not that useful. I mean, I know there's people out there throwing rocks at the radio right now, but honestly, outside of Hong Kong, Macau, and San Francisco, I mean, Cantonese not the most useful. If you want to go into business.
I think it depends on what you consider useful.
Okay, yeah. All right, yeah.
I'm starting to like fall on the side of like I think I would rather spend my time learning Taiwanese than Mandarin at this point, more because I feel like it on the inside it makes me feel happier. And I'm like, well, I think that's worth it, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think I'll ever be fluent in either language at all.
Yeah.
So I might as well go down the path that I'm going to feel that's going to bring me more happiness.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I walk back my statement 100%. When I mean by useful is maybe like international business purposes.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, talking to
and communicating with other people.
Yeah. But yeah, talking to family, of course. Yeah. If you have grandparents or aunties or uncles, yeah, totally useful. But if you want to get
I think utility is perhaps overrated. I think about that like with this we actually do have materials on learning Toisanese. So if you want to learn Toisan, Curtis, we actually have a book to help you learn Toisan. But I think nostalgia and
that's useful.
Those types of things are things that really difficult to quantify, but I think when people, feel it and have it and, taste it, I mean, that's like, that's a juicy part of life.
It is. It is. Okay. I gotta delete my statement. Cantonese, totally useful, guys. You should all learn it. Oh man, I'm gonna cancel myself. All right. Anyway, let's move on. So Berkeley for college.
Yes.
Now, when you went to Berkeley, we all know there's heavily Asian. Did you naturally gravitate towards like Asian groups, or were you like? Because South Bay is a little more mixed.
Yeah. I mean, growing up in San Jose, I grew up in like South San Jose. So if you're familiar with San Jose, in Almaden, like New Almaden. So I would describe it as the most bougie and boring part of San Jose. Yeah. So it was mostly white. Okay. When I was growing up there in the 80s and 90s, I would say like my high school was probably about 25 to 30% Asian when I graduated. Yeah. So I certainly wasn't isolated, and most of my friends were Asian, but we were still definitely a minority.
Right.
And so we still kind of had that, like most of my friends were other kids of immigrants, but we were still kind of on that model minority track, I think it was just a very unspoken understanding that we know we're not white, but if you could learn to be seen as favorable to white people or learn how to like interact in white spaces, like that would be a really great thing. Like that's how you would be successful and that kind of thing. Yeah. So when I went to Berkeley, I don't think I thought of the Asian makeup of the school as much. I was basically trying to pick between Berkeley and LA. Mm-hmm. And I visited LA and I didn't like it. Sorry if you went to UCLA. Yeah, but I liked the vibe of Berkeley better. I really liked there's more trees is I think the thing was. I'm like, I like it better here.
Yeah.
So, but I do think it was when I was there, it was nice that there were a lot of Asian kids around. Mm-hmm. So most of my friends were still Asian, a little bit more diverse than I was in high school. But yeah, it was nice.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what's weird is that I didn't really hang around. Like, for some reason, my parents were both American-born. They have, and they still do, have more Caucasian friends than I do.
Interesting.
Interesting, right? So when I was growing up, we hung around a lot of these things that were predominantly Caucasian attended. And yeah, it's kind of weird. I didn't always feel, we'll get to this later, but I didn't always feel comfortable in my own skin at these events. And then I went to a very Asian high school, shout out Lowell High School, San Francisco, and super Asian. And that was when I almost got more confident. I felt more comfortable in my own skin. It just was interesting that now that I look back on that, and again, we'll talk about that. A lot of the book is talking about getting comfortable in your own skin and
Yeah.
stuff.
I mean, growing up, I don't ever remember being ashamed of being Asian.
Yeah.
I did see, and I knew I wasn't white, and I don't think I ever wanted to be white, but I
Hmm.
do think even just growing up and being constantly told that Asian isn't as good as being white.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it still messes with you, even if
Yeah.
even if you're surrounded by Asian people, Asian friends. Like it's like, like growing up in the 80s and 90s, like you're just not seeing yourself
Yeah.
in, or like it was hard for me to get a picture of what an adult me would be like
Right.
because I just didn't see it.
Yeah.
And people that were older were always of my parents' generation and they were immigrants.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I'm not an immigrant. I'm American born. So it
Mm-hmm.
was I just felt like I'm like I didn't want to be a part of like the white world, but at the same time I just didn't know what was out there for me.
Hmm. Hmm. Actually, Cynthia, we've never talked about this. Did you grow up in the city?
I grew up in the East Bay, so I grew up
Oh,
in like Union City, Fremont, Hayward.
okay. So
Mhm.
that's a pretty heavily Asian area, yeah?
It is now. I think in my early grade school years, there weren't that many Asians
Hmm.
like there. And then I think over, you know, time, there are now tons of Asians, South Asians,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
in Fremont, especially.
Right.
But I went to a high school in Hayward that was predominantly, I'd say, Filipino and white.
Right.
So I don't think my first understanding of my Asianness, I guess, is being a part of the Filipino like American Club.
Uh-huh.
So I think that was, as close as I could get at that juncture in my life. And then in college, I hung out with all different people, like my Japanese American friends, my Korean American friends. And then not until the very end of college did I find myself, I think, as a Chinese American and what that meant
Hmm.
for me. Because at our school at UC Santa Barbara, there were clubs that were language kind of,
Uh,
uh, like they weren't based on language, but people socialized either in Mandarin or in Cantonese.
uh,
And I socialized in English,
yeah.
being an ABC, like an
Mhm.
American born Chinese. So I think I didn't really see those spaces. And so we created a space, the Chinese American Association at UC Santa Barbara. And we started with 8 of us and we ended up with like hundreds of
Huh.
members. We didn't even realize
Yeah.
that that was a thing.
Huh.
So yeah, that was my identity, is much more of a pan-Asian kind of identity, Asian American, and then finally now being Chinese American.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we have three similar but different experiences,
Yeah.
and then we're all Bay Area kids, so our experience is very different from the rest of this country. So I'm curious. So when you go on your book tour, Ellie, I'm curious how the response is going to be in other parts of this country too. I think
I'm
it's
curious too.
very different. Yeah,
We'll find out.
we'll
Yeah.
find out.
If I do end up going to your city, please come. I would love to meet you.
Yeah, yeah. No, we're huge in Virginia. We we have listeners in where else? Michigan. The Infatuasian Nation is everywhere. So it's yeah. So this book. So when well, I kind of stalked your Instagram, so I think I know a
Okay.
little bit about when you
Okay.
started, but I want to hear from you. So when did the idea for this book, or when did you say to yourself, you know what, I should write a book about this?
The short answer is the thought to write a book was not mine. So I was approached by my book agent, Charles Kim,
Mm-hmm.
and he had seen some of my work. So I would say the content of the book is probably 20 years in the making.
Okay.
But the actual act of writing a book and being an author was not something I ever thought I would ever do
Mm-hmm.
until my agent said, "Hey, have you ever thought about writing a book? You should write a book.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, I don't know how to write a book. What are you talking about? And then we had some conversations, and he was like, by that point, I had a website up where I had been putting some materials that I had made, like curriculum materials that I had made,
Uh,
specifically talking about racism from like an Asian American centric perspective.
mhm.
And he was looking at my website and he's like, this stuff is great. You should write a book. And I
Mm,
was like, I'm like, this opportunity doesn't come very often that someone's like knocking on your door, an
right.
agent is actually knocking on your door.
Yeah.
Um, so I was like, this opportunity is too good to pass up. And I at the time, I'm technically a stay-at-home parent. Like I'm self-employed.
Uh-huh.
I just kind of do what I want to do. And I was like, let's just go for it, right? And I have been a teacher, but I'm not a classroom teacher anymore. But I very much approached writing this book like a teacher.
Mm,
And so I was like, let's just see where this goes. And I was like, I think this book is worth writing. I'm going to make sure I write it. I don't know if a publisher is going to publish it because I had some very stringent non-negotiables
uh-huh,
about it at
uh-huh.
that point, about where I was in my life. And like learning about the publishing industry was something I
Mm,
wasn't sure I wanted to, you know, interact with because it's a very white gatekeepery type of industry. And I
yeah.
was at a point in my life where I was kind of like, I don't do that anymore. Like, I don't
Mm.
like bend myself to the desires of white corporate America,
Yeah.
But I was like, well, let's just see where this goes. And thankfully, my publisher, Heyday, they are an independent nonprofit publisher out of Berkeley, but they're award winning. They're very well
Mm,
respected,
mhm.
especially in California publishing. And I was very lucky that my editor, Martina, read the book and she understood it. And I had some non negotiables about like, this book, the target audience for me when I write is Asian Americans,
Right.
like nobody else. Like I'm very sensitive to other communities of color, of course. I want to make sure that I'm speaking respectfully, but I'm not interested in writing a book about being Asian for white people to understand who we are. I want to write a book for us. And so she really understood that.
Mm.
I think most most publishing companies will ask you to, can you broaden this audience?
Right.
Maybe not so specifically just Asians,
Yeah.
but I was just like, these are some non-negotiable things for me
Can you
at this
throw in a
point. Like
white
I'm
character? Can you can you
right,
can,
right. Can you talk a little bit more about white
can
people?
you have a
And
best
even like,
friend?
right, right. Like even in the book, I do talk about white people for a brief moment. And I knew even from my past work working with white people, in these types of conversations, I was like, even mentioning white people, like it's so hard for them to not center themselves. So
Mm,
even I don't know if you remember this part in the book, but I'm very clear. Like I talk a little bit about like white people and whiteness specifically, and then I'm like in this book that is not about white people. Like it's like constant. I have
uh-huh.
to remind people, right?
Yeah.
Who am I writing for? So
Right. Right.
I try to be very clear about that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, uh, in my stalking, I came up with
Okay.
what you say is one of the best summaries of your book. We'll see. This is like 2 years ago,
Okay.
but it says, "What is the book about?" The book is about what the system of white supremacy is like for Asian Americans at the middle of the racial hierarchy and developing healthy racial identity. Is that still
That
fair?
is a really good. Yes. Yes, absolutely. I need to write that on my hand
Okay.
so when people ask me, I can
Yeah,
say it
I took a
again.
screenshot of it. So,
Yes.
all right. So it's talking about how white supremacy has kind of colored or affected our lives in so many ways, and how do we develop an identity outside of that, and how do we heal, and how do we be healthy within the system that has been created?
Yes. Yeah. So when I teach about race and specifically from an Asian American lens and thinking about Asian American history, something I thought was usually missing from people's understanding and even in our own dialogues within the Asian American community is we talk a lot about, like the story of Asian Americans, but just talking about the story of Asian Americans is not. enough to have a full understanding of the system of white supremacy that exists in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in order for us to fully understand what our racial experiences mean and what we're supposed to do with them, it's my belief that we need to have like a much better understanding of the system
Mm-hmm.
that we live in. Because it's like, how do you know if you're doing the right thing or if you are actually solving for a problem if you don't understand the nature of the problem within the system? And so the book is a lot about like trying to explain in a very, readable, approachable way what the system of white supremacy is. Like the beginning of the book, I hope it wasn't too. I was really trying to make it like
Uh-huh.
not too much like a history book, like a boring
Yeah.
history
Yeah. Yeah.
book.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're basically building the system of white supremacy, built on the colonization and genocide of Native Americans and the enslavement of African Americans,
Mm-hmm.
right? And from that, eventually Asian Americans come, and then the system kind of shifts a little bit, but we insert ourselves. What I shouldn't say that's not the right way. Bravo, bravo,
Okay.
bravo.
Yeah.
But we also come, and we don't really fit into this like strict binary of like
Yeah.
white European and black
Yeah.
African.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, what does it mean to be in the middle?
Yeah.
Right? And kind of our story of what that means.
Right.
And that it's an old story, right? Asian Americans have basically been in the United States since pretty much the beginning or very close
Yeah.
to the beginning,
300
right?
years. Yeah. Like,
Right?
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but a lot of us, nobody teaches us these things,
Right.
right? So it's like, if we can learn about these things and know them more, I think that it will help our communities a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Know like who we are, what we want to do, how we want to move forward.
Yeah.
A lot for me as an educator, I was like, I think part of the issue is an educational issue,
Sure.
right? And as an
Yeah.
educator, I'm like, I can help that. I can help teach
Right.
people with this book, hopefully, right? Just a little bit more
Yeah.
about all that history.
So you didn't write a textbook, but what were you thinking when you wrote this? More along the lines of a self-help book, or what were you kind of thinking as you wrote this book? What were your goals like for the
So
reader?
this was the other non-negotiable when I was trying
Uh-huh.
to get the book published is I knew it was considered quote unquote a genre bending book because I was like, well, the question that I at hand is I'm trying to talk about Asian American racial identity. And to me, as a person that has experience is grappling with that and kind of investigating that, it doesn't really fit into one
Yeah.
genre, right? There's history, we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about anti-racism, we are talking about self-help in the sense of, what does it mean to be me as a person, as a
Mm-hmm.
holistic person? How do I care for myself? And so I was like, as someone that's not like really a writer, I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I may never write another book ever again. So it's like this has got to be it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And also having been a classroom teacher, I also kind of understood the limits of teaching about Asian American history in the schools. Like I think it's absolutely necessary, but it's also not enough.
Yeah.
Like even if we were able to, I still don't think it's enough. And so the idea for this book came from just over the years talking to usually, black friends or black coworkers and them talking about like what got them started passionate about, wanting to fight racial injustice and being part of these types of movements. And they usually always talk about their families and their
Mm.
parents or their grandparents or their ancestors. And I was like, I don't think most Asian American families talk about these things at home at all.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's necessarily our fault because I think we just don't know what to say. There's just no education. And so when I thought about the book and marketing the book, it was like, who is this for? Is this
Yeah.
for a school? Is it for who? I'm like, I visioned it as a book that is read in the home. So like I'm a former classroom teacher, but I'm also a mom, and I'm an auntie, and so I'm like, I want us to have better conversations at home with our
Mm.
families, with our kids,
Yeah.
just like, when kids come home from school and things happen to them and they have questions, that we just have stuff
to
we
talk
have
about.
answers for them.
Yeah.
We know what to say. And I
Yeah.
have a lot of friends that are also parents, and they're coming to me and they're like, "What do we say to our kids?" And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, even though we're older now and we're parents now, I think I was like, I think there's still a lot more that we need to be sorting out just as a community,
Yeah.
you know?
Cynthia, you've read it. What did you think as you're reading this? What was going through your head?
I kind of describe it as like a level setting kind of piece.
Uh,
I feel like, you know, the term Asian American is so broad, and I think we all know that, right? And it's broad in the sense of obviously many different cultures that we're representing under this umbrella. We're also representing many different like socioeconomic groups, many different values that intersect
mhm.
and weave together into this like Asian American experience. And my perspective, uh, being in many different spaces, I think in the Bay Area, and it has been that, yeah, we're all very different. I can go hang out with some friends and they're talking about how they have to get their kids into Yale. And then
Mhm.
I'm talking to their friends and they're talking about, how they are trying to, go to the next protest,
Right.
that's happening. And I'm also seeing this arc of time, right? Like I have many friends in their 70s who have been civil rights activists throughout their lifetime. And then there are some newer activists who are like, oh my God, did you know that there's racism? Can we do something about it? And I'm
Have
like,
you heard?
yeah, let's talk about this. So, there is such diversity when it comes to that. And so I think, one of the things that you spoke about the last time you were at my shop was kind of like, how do we get everybody maybe on the same page? And
Uh-huh.
I think this book is, you know, it's one of those books that obviously it's not going to be like the end all. It's not an encyclopedia. There's just no way to encompass all of those things. But there are some basic questions that I think some families have as to why are these things in the news right now? Why is this happening? And we're all answering those questions with different responses because of our different histories and experiences and all these other things. And so I think it's an eye opener for some families who perhaps are not really aware of um, kind of the racial politics, the socioeconomic politics of America, and come also maybe with their own geopolitical understanding of the world. And so I think for me, this is another piece of that puzzle, and maybe it's like a good like place for somebody to kind of like jump into. And you're going to have some feelings around it. And I think that's what I really enjoy is that it's going to catalyze some conversation about it wherever you are.
Mhm.
Um, because, and I think that's kind of what we need is to just really um, start to understand that there is such difference because my friends who are trying to get their kids into Yale, like that is also part of that target audience in a way.
Mhm.
But at the same time, like when you're saying, well, this book is not meant to be speaking to the white audience necessarily, I think there are many Asian Americans who, maybe values wise, has they're not realizing that some of those values are values of the patriarchy or values of whiteness or values of
Mhm.
whatever it is that whatever it is that we're all,
Yeah.
Mhm.
stewing with in our minds.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so I think that to me was really um, the most valuable thing of reading this is that I think it will catalyze some conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Thanks for that, Cynthia. I live in an area where it's a lot like that. I live in the suburbs. So my kid who's in high school, it's like, we are surrounded by talk about SATs and college applications
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
just all that stuff. And, that I grew up with. like I think something I wanted to also express is because me and my peers grew up in that same type of scenario, right? And now that we're older, like we're like in our 40s now, it's like I feel like, well, then I've seen where those paths have gone, and I've
Mm-hmm.
seen what has helped and what has not. And so, and at the same time, after like, with COVID and like the increase in anti-Asian violence and people being really scared about it, and people saying, well, what do we do about racism and all that kind of stuff? Or like, we're afraid and like we thought, this was America and this was like the place of dreams and everyone was equal. So like I've seen like so you're getting these people that are like on this path that they feel like this is the path to make Asian Americans successful.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, they're like, we're freaked out because there's racism.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as someone that's kind of grown up, and I've seen my friends, that I grew up with, they are super successful now. They went to the big schools. They've got the big jobs. They are highly, highly successful.
Right.
And this idea that like, well, even their success has not shielded them
Mm-hmm.
from like the terror of racism.
Yeah.
Like they are just as afraid as anybody else.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, well, we're not hitting the mark when we're thinking, oh, just being successfully, in an industry or financially, like we're gonna prove to white people that we're worthy of being safe, that
Yeah.
we're worthy of not being attacked. Like that is just not an
Mm-hmm.
answer to this. Where I do think that a lot of times that is the answer people have in the back of their heads. Like if we just prove ourselves more,
Yeah.
if we work harder, if we show them that we're okay people, they'll finally accept us. And I'm like, I don't like we've lived through this
Yeah.
and we've seen that it doesn't help that at all.
Yeah.
So we need to be trying something else.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm hoping that this book will help us understand kind of the context of everything, and help us to come up with better solutions and maybe even adjust some of those goals that we have for our kids or for future generations or
Yeah.
how we go about it.
Yeah. Cynthia, what part of the book resonated most with you?
Yeah, I would say I think I'm always very future facing. So I agree that I think looking at the future of, where we can be and envisioning like new futures, right? Like envisioning stuff that we've never even seen before or could never imagine before is really exciting for me. And one of the sections that I'm looking at in particular is like that really resonated with me is this this piece that you have called like How Asian is Asian. And it starts with pecking myself and other Asian Americans to death has always been a familiar pastime. And I think that's kind of like where we can stay in many ways, right? Like
Mm,
people, you criticize yourself, we criticize others for not being able to represent our experiences accurately. We're criticizing, like all these as we're trying to create more representation, there isn't the representation that we see and that we feel is resonant for us. And so I think, my excitement is really like through how do we inspire others to just do their thing and be themselves and and be the future that they want to see, like
mm-hmm.
turning all those like self critiques and all those othering critiques into like how do we make this place better just by being yourself.
Yeah.
And so I think, as I get towards, the last piece of the book, really looking into the future. And then also, right after that is your amazing reference list. And again, like I think this reference list is very much filled with many of the things that I read as an Asian American Studies major many, many, many moons ago.
Hmm.
But, those are like the canon, right? Like I
Yeah.
think there's a certain canon of Asian American writing that all Asian American studies or, ethnic studies majors kind of like go through. And then there is so much more beyond that that has been written and created and talked about. And so I think this reference list, it's almost like a full circle, like reading these two things in conjunction with one another kind of give you a good grounding, I think, of where we are headed, where we can be, and also where we need to build better understanding in order to get to those more full and, like authentic futures for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The reference list. Well, first of all, when I look at the reference list, it boggles my mind because I think I was okay at school, but I wasn't like amazing and I had absolutely no desire to become a professor or anything like that. And so when I look at things like that long reference list, I'm like, I can't believe I did all this research. This is exactly what I didn't want to do, right? Like citing everything and all that kind of stuff. But I think exactly what you said, it was very full circle for me because the research for the book required me to go back and be like, I know I read about this somewhere, or I learned about this somewhere in the past 20 years. I'm like, where is that from? And so I had to kind of go back to, the beginning of my own journey. But also something I was very intentional about is I really wanted this book to be accessible to people, that aren't in academia, right? It's like I want you to be able to give it to, your teenager or
Mm-hmm.
your, an immigrant family member or, I don't want to assume that, Asian Americans are all going to go to college, right? But it doesn't
Right.
mean you can't read a book and want to learn. But so a lot of the research and the references that I use for the book are things that you can access them. Like you don't
Mm.
need to be a part of like some academic institution and get into like the academic journals and all that kind of stuff. A lot of them are like news articles or writings that like are available online. So if you are reading a part of the book and you're like, what? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I want to find out more about this. Like, you can
It's
most
there.
of it. I don't want to say all of it. It's probably 98% of it is readily available. You just need to know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping it really is kind of a springboard for a lot of people to, just find out more about what it is that's like, touching your heart kind of thing.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I'll add a note too is that you can tell you have a little artistic background because
Yeah.
there are graphics. I love a good graphic. It's like you have the escalator of white supremacy, and it's like, you are
Yes.
here.
Yes. This is very much the teacher me.
Yeah.
The graphics is my it was actually really frustrating for me because I'm very much a teacher that needs like a whiteboard or a
Uh-huh.
chalkboard.
Uh-huh.
And so it was like the graphics, it was me trying to translate what I would draw on a whiteboard into like
Mm-hmm.
static pictures in a book.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm very much I love a good, just like a visual picture. Like here, we're moving this way.
Yeah.
The line moves this way.
Right.
So yeah.
Nah, loved it. Perfect. Perfect. All right. So everyone out there, you can go pre-order the book now or come see us on October 17th in San Francisco, California. I'll put a slide of Ellie's other dates. She's going to be around the Bay Area doing some talks and signings as well. All right. You have survived our difficult questions. Are you ready for the lightning round?
I think so. I think so.
Question number 1. Ellie, what is your favorite Taiwan dish or specialty food?
Taiwanese dish is Taiwanese beef noodle soup. Hands
Niromian.
down.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So
Or we
good.
say gubami.
Oh.
In Taiwanese, it's gubami.
Okay. The only word I know in Taiwanese is jabang.
Yeah.
That's my Taiwanese roommates
good one.
taught me that one. Yeah.
That's essential.
You got to know that one. Yeah, you got to know that means to eat. That means sikfan, right? That means to eat. That means
Yeah.
to eat. All right.
Yeah. Have you like eaten?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. For me, I'm gonna go like I love a good niromian, but also the big chicken cutlet that's bigger than your face, the jipai, the fried
Yeah.
chicken cutlet, Taiwanese. You got to get to the night market, get one. They're like 30 inches wide, they're bigger than your face.
They're good.
Those are good.
Crispy.
So crispy.
Crispy and juicy.
All right, let's get into calligraphy a little bit. What's your favorite calligraphy style?
This is a really hard question,
I know, there's
actually.
so many.
For, in terms of me liking it, I don't think there's an answer. But in terms of me writing it, if anybody knows anything about calligraphy, I'm a pointed pen girl.
Okay.
So that's like the type of pen nib that you use. And a style, I mean, probably just like a basic copper plate.
Yeah.
I just like Spencerian is beautiful. It's hard to pick a favorite style, but
All right. What's your now? So the subtitle of your book talks about self-love. What is your favorite way to show yourself some love? It doesn't have to be an Asian way, but what's the favorite way to show yourself some love as a human being?
Well, I love getting a good massage, which I think is
Uh-huh.
very Asian thing to do.
Okay, yeah.
That's probably like the best thing ever.
Yeah.
But
You know what?
self-love.
I agree to disagree. I'm ticklish.
Oh
I
no.
don't like people touching me to start with. So, my wife loves it. She was like, "Why don't we get a couples massage?" And I'm like, "Are you what? Are you trying to you trying to make me suffer? I hate people touching me." Cynthia, you got a favorite way to show love to yourself?
I like going for walks.
Mm.
So that's been my recent thing is going for walks. Yeah, I think
Love
that
walks. San Francisco is such a walkable city too. So everyone out there, go for a walk. And who knows, you might end up at Rice Roll Express, on
you
this
might
walk.
ping pong between on Waverly and Rice Roll Express.
That's the ideal walk. An
Yeah.
ideal walk.
You got to have some motivation for walking, right? So, all right. And our signature question is we like to ask people who their infatuation is. An infatuation is anyone in the Asian community that you admire. Could be someone you know or someone you know from afar, living or deceased. So, Ellie Yang Camp, who is your infatuation?
I am currently obsessed with Connie Chung. I'm
Uh,
like almost done with her memoir. I listened
uh-huh.
to the podcast interview you did with her, which I thought was fantastic
She's
because I
so
loved how
great.
you brought
Yeah.
in like all the Asian stuff.
I
I was
did.
like, this
Yeah.
is the stuff like I wanted to hear about too. But
Yeah.
I'm just like so obsessed with anything Connie Chung right now.
I know. Like, I've always admired her, but now even more, just
Yeah.
knowing what she had. Yeah, because we didn't know that. We didn't know all
Yes,
that
all the
as a,
behind the scenes stuff that
yeah.
she had to deal with. So much
Crazy.
respect. Yeah.
Yeah. And decades before anyone else. It was like,
Yeah.
well, we had local ones here, but on the national level, there was no one for 3 decades. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, good pick. Will not fault any. I'll fight anyone who doesn't love Connie Chung. All right. So everyone out there, we told you where you can get your book. I'll put a link down there. October 22nd is the official launch date. But come see us over at On Waverly. Cynthia will give you snacks and maybe a box of lemon tea if you come down.
Vita soy.
Vita Soy. So many good events too. I'll put a link to Cynthia's. We got Friday. We got a vegetarian cookbook author coming down. We got what? Oh, you could do. You know better than I do. We have Ellie on Thursday, the 17th. You got
Mhm.
children's books on this Sunday, I believe. 3 children's books author. Who else you got?
We have, I mean, I don't even know. Yeah, lots of cookbooks happening
Yeah.
in November. We have Christina Cho in conversation with Brandon Ju.
Yeah.
So that should be a delicious
With
talk.
food, right? There's food available on that one.
Maybe there might be a little surprise little bite. This Friday
Okay.
for sure, there will be some bites.
Uh,
Yeah, we
man.
try to do something a little bit different. We try to give all of our guests the freedom to just be themselves. You're
Yeah.
amongst friends, and being an Asian American, Pacific Islander, Native Hawaiian, whatever, inclusive space, you can kind of like leave some things at the door and just walk in as yourself
Yeah.
and see what that unfolds for you.
That's very cool. Every time I go, I meet someone too. Like this last Monday, met Lian Wong Lam, and there's always just cool people to meet at these events, and you're gonna bump into someone and meet some new people. It's super fun. It's super fun. So looking forward to that. I gotta drop off some stickers so
Yeah.
that if any of my listeners walk in and say, "Hey, you got any Infatuasian stickers?" You'll have them behind the register. You can just give one out.
Oh, that'd be fun.
That'll be
I'm gonna
fun.
have to get one when I'm there.
Absolutely. No, you get one for free. Don't worry. You get one too, Ellie. Don't worry. We'll bring a few. So, yeah, come on down. Get a book signed in calligraphy, which is
Yeah,
going to be
yeah.
super fun on the 17th. What time are we starting? We're starting at 5:30?
5:30, yes.
5:30 on the 17th. I think that's a Thursday.
Mhm.
So come on by. And then, yeah, if you can't make it, at least order the book. You'll definitely learn something. It'll give you something to talk about. It will be something that will stimulate thoughts that you didn't know you had thoughts about. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. Ellie, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Curtis. It's been so fun.
Yeah, we'll talk again soon.
Yes, we will.
And Cynthia, as usual, always fun having you.
Thank you. I'll probably see you later today.
Very soon. Very, very soon. Yeah, rice roll in half an hour. All right. So everyone out there, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate all of you listening to our podcast. You can write to us a letter, or not a letter. You can write to us an email at infatuasianpodcast@gmail.com. But if you write in calligraphy, maybe you can send it to me. I'll give you the address. But email works as well. So infatuasianpodcast@gmail.com. And give us a follow over at Instagram and Facebook at Infatuasian Podcast. Ellie, what's your handle for Instagram?
It's EYC. So 3 E's, the word Y, and the word C, S-E-E. So.
Yeah. We'll type that out for everyone out there. You can follow Ellie on Instagram and find out where she's going to be talking about Louder Than the Lies. This has been so much fun. So everyone out there, come see us or at least buy the book. And thank you so much for listening. So on behalf of Ellie, Cynthia, and myself, we hope that you're all happy, healthy, and safe out there. We'll talk to you again soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.